As a filmmaker, I'm always looking for gear that's either going to make my footage look better or help make my life easier, and looking back on 2023, I tried a lot of gear. And I'm not just talking about buying new cameras and lenses either. Since I've already seen a bajillion of those best gear of the year videos making the rounds on YouTube, I'm gonna approach this a little bit differently because when I talk about filmmaking gear, I'm talking about everything that supports your life when you're out there making stuff. Because there's a lot more that goes into being a professional filmmaker than the camera you own. And considering I spent more than half the year shooting on location, oh, hello there. I can't do it. I can't even fake it. I have some strong thoughts about what's worth your money and what's not. So in this video, I'm gonna have a little bit of fun with the normal best of the year video, and instead I'll give out awards for what I think was the best filmmaking stuff I used this year across a bunch of different categories. So yes, I'm gonna give out an award for my favorite camera this year and for my top lenses and lights too, and all the other tech stuff you'd expect, but I'm also gonna go a little bit deeper and award things like audio accessories and health products for life on the road, and even clothing. Because after spending more than 150 days traveling this year, I can say that filmmaking is a lifestyle as much as it is a job, and investing in the right gear is about a lot more than just a camera. Okay, this is gonna be a monster video because there's a lot to cover in this one, so I'm gonna stop talking and let's get right into it. Before we dive into it, just a couple of ground rules to get out of the way. The brands I'm talking about here didn't pay me. Some of this stuff I was sent for free over the course of the year, and some of it I paid for myself, but none of this gear made it onto this list for monetary reasons. This video does have a sponsor, Audiio, but I'm gonna talk about them a little later, and they're the only one. Secondly, the gear I'm awarding doesn't have to be a new release this year, and this isn't a roundup of the newest tech. It's the gear that I found myself using again and again on shoots around the world, and so it's the gear that I feel good about recommending to you. All right, so we're gonna come out of the gate hot here and get right to the award for my top camera of the year. And I'm getting this one out of the way because for me, the kind of camera you shoot on these days is one of the least interesting questions. Pretty much all cameras are great these days at a certain price point, and it doesn't really matter what company you go with when it comes to image quality. I mean, we're spoiled for choice, and I doubt I could tell the difference between footage shot on a Sony versus a Blackmagic versus a Canon versus an Arri for that matter, as long as the person holding it knows what they're doing. But for me personally, there was one camera that kept surprising me with just how many different roles it could fill in my workflow, and I seem to be using it more and more the longer I have it. So, drum roll please, my award for the best camera of 2023 goes to the Sony FX3. No surprises here, everyone knows what this thing is, and you've seen it all over YouTube already. I'm filming on it right now, so it's not in my hands, but I bought mine 2 years ago, intending to use it mainly for this channel, which I still do, but what surprised me was how compatible it was with my professional workflow and how much I find myself using it on big productions, sometimes over my bigger and more professional cameras like the FX9. Because of the small form factor, I can put it on sliders and gimbals, I can mount it on cars, or any other place that I'd never be able to fit my main camera, and I don't have to sacrifice anything in terms of image quality. But for me, it's really the audio options that sets this thing apart, and the top handle and XLR audio ports are really what make this thing different than most of the competition. I can run a shotgun mic and a lav at the same time, plus I can keep timecode going internally, which means I can use it for multicam verite coverage, which is what I do most of the time. By ditching the photo features of most hybrid mirrorless cameras, this thing has manual buttons for the most common settings, which I love. And having great autofocus means that if I'm shooting alone, I can use it as a B cam for interviews without having to monitor it constantly. I have different feelings about autofocus for scene coverage, but for that kind of situation, it's perfect. On top of that, the insane low light performance means it can shoot in some situations where the FX9 just can't. Now, most of the time, I still prefer to shoot on the FX9 when it's possible, and it's still gonna be my A cam for 2024, but because of how much more versatile the 3 is, it's getting the award. In an emergency, the FX3 could replace my FX9 on a shoot and do all the same things, but the 9 could never do all the things that I use the 3 for, and that makes the FX3 special. If you're shooting seriously and want a camera that can do pretty much everything in a small package and at a reasonable price point, I mean, reasonable relatively speaking, because this is filmmaking gear after all, I don't think there's a better option than the FX3 out there. Okay, so if we just did the camera award, then I guess it makes sense to go right into the lens award, and this one might be a little bit surprising because I'm not giving it to my Fuji Cine Zooms or the primes that I shoot most of my projects on. Actually, the most useful lens of the year for me was one that I don't even need all that often, but when I did need it, it was a lifesaver. And that's this monster, the Sigma 60-600 Sport. Now maybe that's not what you were expecting from a documentary cinematographer, because I tend to shoot mostly between 24 and 50 millimeters, but the 60-600 is special in the world of long lenses. And it's not special because I did a bunch of chromatic aberration or bokeh tests on it, or even because of how much it zooms. The reason I love it is, weirdly, because of how wide it is. That's not at all what you'd expect to hear about a super zoom, but it's actually the most interesting thing about it. Most of these long zooms, especially the good ones, are like 200-600 or maybe 150-600, and that means that they're very specific tools. You put it on when you need extreme reach, but if you need anything like a medium or wide shot, you have to change lenses. With a 60mm though, you can do a lot of stuff beyond just extreme zooms. For me, this is huge because it means I can carry one single lens that covers me for all of my telephoto needs. I can set it on a mountaintop and get a close-up of an animal or a rock climber or something. Then I can also pull back and shoot landscapes and scenic details. For me, that's a big deal because I honestly don't use super zooms very much, and having everything I could ever need packed into one lens makes my life as a documentary filmmaker a lot easier. The major con, apart from the price tag, is that it is huge and it's really heavy, but it's still so much better than having to carry around a 70-200 and a 200-600, and all without having to change lenses constantly. Now, it might not come out into the field with me on every shoot, but when I needed it this year, there was nothing else that could have done the same job while also giving me professional level image quality. Okay, next up is my award for my favorite light of the year, and this one is one I'd never have predicted a year ago, because the light I found myself most excited about this year wasn't the most powerful or the biggest, and I didn't even know this company made lights until they sent me this one. But somehow it's one of the few lighting products that feels innovative and different, instead of just racing to put bigger and bigger chips on the lights we already know we love. And that's the Zhiyun Mollis lights. Now, it's surprising because not only is this made by a company that I only knew for making budget gimbals before, but because it's insanely powerful in a very small form factor. I mean, this is a 100-watt light and I can literally fit this in my pocket. And on top of that, it also has an interchangeable battery system, which makes mounting them in different places much easier than when you have to run cables to heavy DTAP batteries or into AC power. There's a 60-watt and a 200-watt version of this thing as well, and all of them make it possible to get really strong lights into places that haven't been possible before. And I'm not sure if I need to say this or not, but Zhiyun has been a sponsor of this channel in the past, but with that said, they are not sponsoring this video in any way. Like I said, the only sponsor of this video is Audiio, and it's been over 6 months since they sent me this thing. There's no commercial interest for me to push these. I just really like it when companies go in a different direction than everyone else and create something unique. It's so useful that it comes on pretty much every shoot with me now, and it's so small I could probably fit like 15 of these things inside the same carrying case that I use for something like an Aperture 120D, which opens up all sorts of remote lighting options. Super cool, and I'm looking forward to seeing where Zhiyun goes with this line. Moving on, it's time for what I call the Disruptive Tech of the Year award, and this one is all about gear that help make traditionally expensive things more accessible to small teams. If you work at the professional level, odds are you've had to send a video feed from your camera back to Video Village or maybe directly to a director's monitor before. And for 99% of the jobs I came up on, you'd use a Teradek for that. And Teradeks are great, don't get me wrong, but they're also crazy expensive. And if you're like me and only need to output a wireless feed occasionally, spending thousands of dollars for a kind of niche tool is a bit hard to swallow. But if you wanted a solid system, there really wasn't another option. That is until Hollyland started making these, the Mars 4K system. Now, I know this wasn't created this year and it's been around a little longer than some of the other things on this list, but it's pretty new to me and these are my awards, so we'll all just have to deal with it. The reason I love this system so much is that because in docs, which is what I mainly shoot, the best solutions are the ones that can integrate with what you already have without needing to pack and carry a bunch of extra stuff. The Mars system doesn't even require you to have a monitor because you can just transmit right from the camera to any smartphone or iPad and create director's monitors matters with what you already have in your pockets. I mean, you can use the receiver to turn a TV or a computer screen into a reference monitor because anything that works with HDMI can be part of your video village. If you have a bunch of ACs and a whole team of techs on set with you, then maybe this kind of thing isn't such a big deal, and I don't really expect these to replace more expensive setups on big narrative and commercial sets. But for me, traveling internationally and working with small teams, this system totally disrupts the way I'm used to thinking about wireless monitoring. The signal strength is amazing. I can power it from my camera's V-mount batteries with USB or with an NPF battery. There's virtually no lag, and it's really simple to connect. Plus, the most basic Teradek package is around $1,500 to $2,000 depending on what you need, while this transmitter is less than $350 at the time of recording. All you need to do is pick up an old iPad mini from Facebook Marketplace, which can be had for really cheap these days. Then you throw it in a rugged case with a neck strap, and boom, you've got a fully functioning low latency director's monitor for less than $500. I love that kind of disruption. All right, let's dive into audio quickly, because when it comes to documentary storytelling, as we all know, or hopefully know by now, the image is only half the battle. Luckily, we're living in a time when there are a ton of great options for microphones, and I seem to get a new email every week asking me to promote some new brand shotgun mic, but none of them are the winners of this year's Audiio Award. Instead, the award is going to a company that solved a very real problem I had in doc production with small crews, and that's the issue of how to mic more than one character when shooting with a single camera. Now, most normal cameras have two XLR inputs, and since one of them is always taken up by the shotgun, that only leaves one input for a wireless lav mic. And that's all well and good if you're following a single person, but what if you're covering a conversation between multiple people, or if you have even multiple main characters in a scene? Enter the mighty tentacle Tracky, which I'm just going to call Tentacles from here on out. Tentacles are internally recording lav mics with a 32-bit float, which basically means they have incredible recording range and they're very hard to clip, and they don't need to be plugged into your camera because they record to an internal micro SD card instead. There are definitely other brands that make internally recording lavs, with Zaxcom being the much more expensive OG player in this space, and newcomers like Rode and DJI also offering their own versions. But I personally think that the Tentacles are the perfect middle ground in terms of price to feature ratios, but also because of how well they work with the timecode system. So internally recorded timecode is great, but only if you can sync it to your camera easily afterwards, which gets even harder if you're shooting with multiple audio sources and multiple cameras. Tentacle, the company, also makes these tiny timecode boxes that work really well, and all of it syncs together super easily through their app. These days, I carry 2 of the timecode boxes and 3 trackies with me on every job on top of my old Sennheiser lavs, and that means I can send perfect timecode to 2 cameras and mic up to 4 people at once if I need to. For small crews where you don't have the luxury of a dedicated sound recordist, these things are a lifesaver. They're reasonably affordable, but they still fit into a professional workflow in the way that the more budget options struggle to. I absolutely love these things. And since we're talking about audio gear, this is a perfect time to talk about a new technology that is going to change the game for content creators and filmmakers, and even though it's in the early stages of its life, I think it's already incredibly useful. So have you ever been watching a movie or maybe listening to music and then you heard something that you thought would be perfect for your own project? Like a few months ago, I was watching the Anthony Bourdain doc Roadrunner, and there was a montage that used a Brian Eno song that worked so well for the mood of the scene, and it hit me really hard for some reason. And then I really wanted to have the same vibe in a short I was working on. But obviously I can't afford to license a Brian Eno song for my indie short, so what are you supposed to do? Normally you'd have to get on a royalty-free music site like Audiio, which is the sponsor of today's video, which is where I get most of my music for these videos and my personal projects. Then you start searching for tracks based on mood or genre or something like that. Pretty standard. But this year, Audiio launched a brand new feature called Link Match that's gonna make this whole thing so much easier. So let me just open my laptop here for a sec and show you how this works. So here's the Brian Eno song I like so much. So all I'm gonna do is copy the link, then open Audio. Normally I would go to music and search in the old fashioned way, but instead I'm gonna go to Link Match AI, paste the link, and it's gonna give me a bunch of matches here. And if I play this first one, Honestly, that is pretty much the same vibe, or at least really close to the same vibe of that Brian Eno song. So give it a try for yourself. It is amazing technology, and at least for me, I think this is really, really exciting, and it's gonna save me a lot of time. If you wanna try out Link Match for yourself, or if you just need access to the best value royalty-free music site that I know of, Audiio is giving viewers of this channel 70% off their pro plan if you use the code Luke70. It means you get a year of Link Match plus unlimited music downloads for like $59, which is a crazy good deal, or you can even get a lifetime membership for $199 using the code Luke199, which is the same price most of these services charge for a single year. Really innovative stuff, and it makes me excited for the future of music in the indie film world. All right, we are deep into it now, and it's time to get into some of the fun awards for things beyond cameras and lenses, and I'm gonna start off with the Health and Fitness Award. As a full-time filmmaker, and now with running this YouTube channel as well, I spend an obscene amount of time behind a keyboard because so much of the filmmaking and YouTube process is downstream of writing. From writing pitch decks to scripts, the foundation of pretty much all good filmmaking is writing, and that means way more sitting than is healthy. By the end of a full day of writing at my desk, I would start to feel pretty bad with back pain and stiff hips and all the normal terrible feelings, so I decided to try and see if I could change it up a bit. And I'm happy to say I did. So the winner of the 2023 Filmmakers Health and Fitness Award goes to my under-desk walking treadmill. Well, not the one I have specifically, but more the broad category of under-desk treadmills and what they represent for the frequently desk-bound like me. The one I have is made by a company called Motion Gray, and I've been more or less happy with it. It's small, it's affordable, and when you pair it with a standing desk, it means I can write for hours while moving my body. When I first saw these things online, I thought it was kind of a dumb internet trend and that it would get really hard to get work done while walking, but I gotta say I was wrong. Not only does walking while I work make me feel better physically, but it actually helps me focus better and I get locked into what I'm doing. Something about the movement puts me in a zone where I don't seem to get distracted as easily, sort of like the way I have some of my best creative ideas while I'm just going for a walk, or you daydream while you're driving a car. This is one of the first of these I've ever owned, and it's been a good entry-level option because I wasn't really sure if these were for me, and so spending a ton of money on one didn't make a lot of sense. It's definitely on the budget side, like this thing costs less than $200 US, so don't expect a gym quality treadmill here, but it does a good job of making me stand up and move my legs instead of sitting. So if you're anything like me and you spend what feels like half your life at a desk, maybe try one of these things out. There's lots of options here, but this one works for me for now. Maybe I'll give an update this time next year and see how it holds up to a 200-pound man walking on it every day for an hour though. Whatever brand you go with though, filmmaking is a super physical job at the end of the day, at least the way I do it anyways, so if I can get fitter while also knocking out scripts and emails, I'm all for it. I've gotten in thousands of extra steps per day since unboxing this thing and somehow gotten more work done. Win-win. Now let's move on to the clothing category because for me at least, the clothes I wear make a huge difference in my quality of life out there in the field. I don't usually work on sound stages, and this year I spent more than 115 unbroken days working in the Arctic, which you probably know if you've been watching this channel for the last little while, so it really does matter how I'm dressed. Jeans and a black t-shirt might be okay in a studio setting, but out in the real world where documentaries are made, conditions are a major factor. Look, I'm a total nerd when it comes to this stuff, and I used to work in forestry as a tree planter, so I could talk all day about jackets and layering systems and all that, but of all the things I wore this year, one thing stood out above the rest, and that's these gloves from the Heat Company. For me personally, it's always been my hands that suffer the most when conditions get rough, and if you've ever tried to shoot a shoulder-mounted interview in the cold, you'll know how painful it is when you can't feel your fingers. The problem is most gloves are too hard to operate a camera or a drone with, and so you end up taking them off. And then you get really cold. These things are like those old school fingerless hobo mittens, but on steroids. It's not a new concept, but it is the best iteration of them that I've ever seen. When you need to fly a drone or push buttons on your rig, you can flip these open and they'll stay there because of this little magnet. Then you can use your fingers. Then when you settle into your shooting position, you can close them up and keep the warmth in. And unlike those fingerless gloves you're used to, these things stay where you want them to because of the magnets that are sewn into the surface, and they don't flap all over the place. There's even a tiny little pocket in here for those hand warmer packs, which is gonna make them good in a whole range of temperatures. I think they were originally designed for the German military mountain units or something, and that should tell you everything you need to know about their engineering. highly recommended. Okay, we're finally getting close to the end, and this last award is maybe my favorite category, and that's what I'm gonna call the Ultimate Filmmaking Nerd Prize for the piece of gear that's for the serious gear nerds like me. As someone who specializes in doc production and also travels all the time for shoots, one of the hardest things to find on location can be a good chair. Whether it's for an interview in the Great Rift Valley or shooting a YouTube video in the Arctic Circle, having a place for your subjects to sit is usually an afterthought until you realize you don't have one. There's one great solution though, and it's the winner of this year's Gear Nerd Prize, the collapsible stool. There's not much to say here, it's just a little round disc that you can open up and adjust to any height to give yourself a simple stool that can hold up to 260 pounds. If you search around, there are a bunch of brands that sell these, and I'm pretty sure they all must come out of the same factory because they all seem pretty much identical to me, but I'll link to the one that I have anyways. I've used it as a chair for on-camera interview subjects, as a stepladder when hanging lights or diffusion, and I've used it constantly over the last few months to shoot YouTube videos in the middle of nowhere by myself. It's the kind of thing you probably didn't know existed, but solves a problem you might not have even consciously known you had, but once you have one, you'll be blown away by how much you use it. It's for the truly nerdiest of the nerdy out there, but if you know, you know, and this one has been well worth the money for a true nerd like me. So there we go, the 2023 Filmmaking Gear Awards from the point of view of a traveling doc filmmaker. Like I said, this list isn't made up of the newest and shiniest tech, it's the stuff that I found myself relying on over and over again on shoots all over the world as a director, cinematographer, and part-time YouTuber. Let me know what your list would have looked like in the comments below, and happy holidays. See ya.